Hey friends, thanks so much for tuning in. It's great to have you back. We're thrilled to have back on the line our good friend, Bix Weir from Roota.com. Bix, how are you?
I'm good, Sean. How are you?
Well, I'm good, man. I'm wondering if you'll help me document the collapse today.
That's what we love to do.
Well, it's got to be done, Bix, because as I've been saying lately, there's just too much going on for any one of us to document the collapse by ourselves. So I'd like to kick off the bat today with a really juicy piece of information coming out of Zero Hedge. I had no idea. This is insane. Listen to this. ETF trading volume eclipses US GDP. In the past 12 months, investors, Bix, I put that in air quotes, traded 18.2 trillion worth of ETF shares. For perspective, that means the amount of dollars exchanging hands through ETFs is now more than the entire US gross domestic product, which stands reportedly at 17.4 trillion. This is coming from Bloomberg. Bix. Does this not just trip you out? That's an insane fact.
You can just lump that in with all the rest of them. The volumes that are traded ever since the electronic trading came into effect in the 70s and 80s are phenomenal. And it just, what it does is it skews the reality of what's really going on here. Are we really trading shares of stock, bonds, commodities, or is there something else going on where these large bullion banks and banks in general and hedge funds trade these electronic blips back and forth to set the price of the commodity underlying it? And that's really what's going on. If you look at the volumes on the COMEX or the LBMA, it's so distorted compared to how much of the underlying asset is available that it's completely off the range, and nobody should believe what they see as far as prices, or even that they own anything in their 401ks, in their commodity account. All this stuff is just electronic blips going back and forth. A lot of times these banks trade with themselves, take two sides of the trade and bounce it back and forth, trying to steer the price down or up. And they pull quotes, and they all kinds of different computer tricks you can use to spoof trades and things like that. It's completely out of control.
Yeah, well, we documented this in our conversation, the Shocking Truth History Channel Can't Broadcast. So, Bix, when you say you may not even own what you think you own, what you just said, I just want to bump that out a little bit. Can you quantify that for people? Because as you and I discussed in detail in that video, the Shocking Truth History Channel Can't Broadcast, you discussed CEDE Company and this high-frequency trading and the billions of shares that are traded day in and day out that you and I both know can't possibly all be settled or settled correctly. Flush it out for people. How is it that people will have brokerage accounts that may say their money has doubled in the past several years, but in fact, those are just ones and zeros? Quantify for us how it's possible that people may not own what they think they own.
Well, it really started back in the 60s, when a lot of people started getting into the stock market, and there weren't computer programs around to do the efficient transfer of title and things like that. So there were stacks and stacks of stock certificates and checks and contracts piling up at the brokerage houses. It was a gigantic problem. So what happened was they basically turned everything electronic in the early 70s. And thus was built the current version of the DTCC, the Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, that is supposed to settle all these trades. What their job is, when you buy a stock, you're supposed to get the certificate put into your name, all the transfer documents, and exchange the money.
Within 3 days, right?
Within 3 days.
That's the settlement period, right?
That's the settlement period, and even the SEC says it's not happening. Mm-hmm. So you're buying stock, and it's not getting put in your name. It's just going on your broker's monthly receipt that they give to you in statement. Over 300 million shares are not cleared every day. And that's a crazy number, considering, if you look at the amount of trades that go on, and this is the reason for it, is there's no company in the world that can settle these trades when there's millions of shares trading back and forth every second between these companies' computers. So the DTCC basically lumps it all and puts it all in this company called CEDE Company. CEDE Company is a bankruptcy remote entity. It's a shell company, but according to the U.S. Congress, who did an investigation in the early 70s, there's one or two people or they said at the time it was people who owned Seed and Company, and they didn't say who it was. Is it the Rothschilds? Is it somebody else? Nobody really knows, but every share certificate is put into the name of Seed and Company. So the real owner is not your brokerage house, it's not the company who issues the stock, it's not you, it's not the person who buys it. It's Seed and Company. They own pretty much everything, even mortgages now. All the mortgages that are written by banks are put into mortgage-backed securities. Those mortgage-backed securities are held in the name of Seed and Company. It really is crazy. And when the shell game stops, and it's really a musical chairs game right now with the shares on the stock market and the commodities and things like that, everybody's going to stand up and say, okay, well, I own 50 shares of Apple Computer. I want to cash it in. And then another guy's going to say, well, I own those same shares too. And 10 more people will say, I own those same shares too. And there's not going to be a mechanism for clearing all this out in the end. So the system has to keep going. They have to allow high frequency trading because all these shares that are being traded are mythical, and nobody really knows who owns what right now.
Yeah, that's right. And, this blind shorting of shares that we've seen rampant over the past decade or more, that's a real problem too, Bix, because a lot of these rogue traders or trading entities or trade fixers can borrow endless amount of shares, and they're supposed to borrow those shares from real accounts. So those would be real accounted for shares. But I don't even think that's happening anymore.
No, they don't. They don't because at the brokerage houses, what they need to do is they have to net the shares out. So what they'll do is buy and sell. It's all got to do with volume. If you sell 1 million shares of something and then buy 1,000,001 shares, the only thing you have to report is the difference, is that one share. So that's how they drive the prices down intraday, or even what the commodity dealers like to do, and a lot of the big banks is within the month attack the prices of gold and silver with naked shorts and just computer sell positions, and then by the end of the month buy them back, and then you only have to report the net number that you manipulated the market by. So it really comes down to, when do companies have to report what they did, and why are they netting out everything, and why don't we know, for example, on the COMEX, why don't we know how many shares were bought and sold from each company of these huge traders, JP Morgan and Citibank, going back and forth with each other? Why don't we know? We kind of know their positions, but those positions are at the end of the day and the end of the month. We don't know how many shares are traded within the day and why they do that. Why would they dump a billion contracts or 1 billion ounces worth of contracts on the market in a day and buy them back the next day and things like that? That stuff we don't know, and the only way to know that it's happening is to look at the volumes. And if you look at the volumes in silver on the COMEX, over 300 billion ounces of silver, representative ounces, because they're paper contracts and futures and options, over 300 billion are traded every year. It's just insane, the amount of numbers of these electronic trades that basically determine the price of gold and silver, the physical commodity underlying this. And it's completely illegal according to commodity law, and the CFTC has even said that it is illegal for the COMEX to set prices. Mm-hmm. It should be price discovery based on the underlying physical, but there's no physical market either. Right now you're looking at a huge shortage of silver. People are struggling to find it, and yet we're at the lowest prices we've had in years. It's completely illegal, but it's allowed to happen because it keeps the system going. Yeah. And once you stop the system, that's when everybody has to show their cards, and that's what the big players don't want to do.
That's right. It's a big game of musical chairs, and when the music stops, most of our friends, neighbors, and colleagues are going to find themselves without a chair. And you talk about it being completely illegal, what they're doing with silver. You mentioned price discovery. There should be market price discovery. Well, we know there isn't market price discovery that's legitimate when there is a silver fix and when there is a gold fix. Of course, it used to be a twice daily silver and gold fix. They're headed by the Rothschilds and that banking cartel, and the Rothschilds got out of it, I think, back in around 2006. It's now a computerized silver fix and a computerized gold fix. And, when you mention that it's completely illegal, where does this end, Bix, when we know that Congress itself has mandated that Congress people can benefit from insider trading, knowledge that they've gained from their corporate lackeys that come in, and they're saying it's legal. Now we see a report that the Supreme Court will rule on what is and what constitutes insider trading. But when you have a rogue government that allows all of this stuff to happen and they deem it legal, or in the case of CFTC, they deem it illegal but don't do anything about it, where does it end? I mean, my heart goes out to people that listen to these interviews and say, okay, well, Helga Zepp-LaRouche and Harley Schlanger are calling for Glass-Steagall, and it's the only thing that will save us. But we're not going to get Glass-Steagall because these criminals in charge aren't going to give it to us. You got to empathize with that point of view because the fox is in the henhouse, Bix.
Yes, and the best example of this is the CFTC judge. They have their separate legal system. They have two judges. They call them administrative judges. The CFTC judge who was there the longest, this guy named George Painter, when he was retiring, he wrote a note saying, "I'm retiring, but here's the problem." The other judge, Judge Levine, told Wendy Graham, who was the CFTC head at the time, that he would never rule in favor of a plaintiff if it ever came up in front of his court.
Right.
Basically saying that he is allowing everything to go on as is, as the bankers wanted to, and they're never going to claim manipulation. And this is a great example of a whistleblower, a very heroic whistleblower who blows the whistle on the one of two judges at the CFTC saying this is complete fraud. And what happened? It came out in the newspaper and nobody said a word about it, and nobody did a thing about it. The CFTC judge, Wendy Graham, herself is the wife of the congressman, Phil Graham. I mean, it just gets so incestual. She was also on the board of Enron back in the day. I mean, the criminals with the politicians and the bankers and the brokers, and they feed off each other, and it's such an ugly mess right now. That's why I'm saying that when this system breaks down, which I think is September, October timeframe, when this system breaks down, it's going to break down that part of our system also. If the people are strong enough to stand up and say, okay, who are the criminals? Where are they? And what are we going to do? You're going to see most of Congress just get thrown out because they're all in the pockets of everybody else. And it'll be very disruptive, but I believe that we can get through it. We have a constitution. We can always go back to that one day. Hopefully it hasn't been in play in so long. Don't expect things to happen unless we throw out the entire system.
Yeah, and thanks for documenting that with those with the corrupt judge and the whistleblowing judge, because that speaks to the very crux of our problems, and it really reminds me of Charles Savoy's work with the Pilgrims and the Silver Squelchers series, which is an incredible series of. Now we just posted number 20 of Silver Squelchers, and I know he's got about 10 more to go before that entire story has been told, but it will make your toes curl to understand how deep the corruption goes and how long it's been going on for. It goes back decades and decades. And what I'd like to do, Bix, is recount this article from Market Watch. Forget whether $100 silver is possible. How about $1,000? This comes from Market Watch, and it was published on July 30th here, so it's a fresh article. And the reason I want to bring that up, Bix, is not to talk about $1,000 silver specifically, but to mention the fact that in this article, the author, Avi, is saying that he sees $100 silver in the next 5 years and $1,000 silver in the next 50 years. And what I find absolutely hilarious about that point of view, $1,000 silver in 50 years, is that his entire paradigm is that this current system continues for another 50 years, when you and I and all our listeners and all the experts we speak to know that that is mathematically impossible. This dollar-based, debt-based paradigm cannot possibly go on for another 50 years. It's mathematically impossible.
I agree, but we've been riding this thing for a while, and we see the potential end coming and coming and coming, and yes, it's staring us in the face now, and it has kind of stared us in the face before, but there are just so many things that are falling apart as we speak that I'm in the camp that it's not a 50-year issue now. It's more like a 50-day issue. And but in the next 2 months, we're going to see some serious dominoes fall in Europe, uh, even in other countries. I mean, Greece is yeah, they're bad off, but they're not the worst off. We're the largest debtor nation in the world. We just don't tell people that.
Right.
And the insanity of it all, and the only way it's being held together is through computer manipulation, through the derivative market, and with Deutsche Bank firing their two CEOs, them being the largest derivative holder in the world, and Greece going down with huge amounts of derivatives. There's some serious cracks in the pillars of the bad guys.
Well, there sure are. And if you don't mind, I want to circle back to Charles Savoy because, you remember the U.S. Mint shortage of raw material there, Bix? Well, Charles wanted to remind people that this is such a tedious story from his point of view. And he says, you know how long this has been going on? In any natural market, manufacturing capacity adjusts to enable transformation of raw material into finished products so that demand is matched with supply. There is absolutely a shortage of raw material silver. Because, for instance, if the housing market were booming and the timber was available for conversion into lumber, but there was inadequate sawmill capacity, the market would add sawmills. Silver blanks are no different in that sense. There is a silver shortage, which is why Dow Chemical, DuPont, Ferrell Corporation, and Tiffany & Company recently abandoned their long-term memberships in the Silver Users Association. They hope to sidestep scandal when the blow-up transpires. The short profile in COMEX Silver is a billboard that someone fears a higher silver price move than they fear the grave. Now, those are powerful words coming from Charles Savoy, but again, this is the man who has documented how deep this complicity and this conspiracy goes to demonetize silver and to crush silver and to paper manipulate silver. So let's just talk about silver shortages, Bix.
Well, I don't, truthfully, I don't think there is a silver shortage. It comes down to supply and demand and market pricing. For $1,000 an ounce, if you're out there and you're going to pay $1,000 for an ounce of silver, someone will sell you an ounce of silver for $1,000. The problem lies in that they're holding the price too low. So the shortage is not a market shortage. The shortage is the U.S. Mint is not willing to pay, $20 for silver or $30 for silver, as they're mandated to do in the law. They have to buy silver in quantities to meet demand, and the only person that can stop them from doing that is Treasury Secretary Jack Lew, which he has done by telling them to stop buying silver. It isn't a shortage issue. It is a pricing issue.
Yeah.
So yes, at $1,000 silver, you can buy some silver. The mint will be able to go out and buy silver at $1,000 an ounce, which they are supposed to do, and that wouldn't be a shortage of silver. The problem is there's a shortage of silver under $15. That's the problem.
Well, that's a good point because we do often hear that, we couldn't possibly have a gold-backed dollar again because there's not enough gold on planet Earth to reback the dollar. Well, that's not true. The price of gold is the ultimate fix. I mean, They could reback the dollar with gold, but gold would have to be at a much, much higher price. In fact, according to Bloomberg, and Bloomberg we bring up, it's a funny thing because they're really the mockingbird mainstream financial media, but Nicholas Larkin had recently written an article about if China had 10,000 tons of gold, it would require the gold price to adjust to $50,000 to $60,000, and he goes on to explain why he believes that to be true, not taking into account any of the fraud going on at Fort Knox or the New York Fed and the Fed vaults with the gold and all the leased and rehypothecated gold. We don't even know how much gold the United States government has at this point, Bix.
we don't know how much gold anybody has, truthfully, and nobody does. The official statistics were invented in the 1960s by Harry Oppenheimer. It has been proved time and time again that he just made up the number of 180,000 tons of gold have ever been mined, which is the current number. All those numbers go back to Goldman Sachs, to Jay Aaron, all the way back to GFMS back in the 60s. Harry Oppenheimer said, hey, we need a study of how much gold is out there. And Harry Oppenheimer of the De Beers family cartel said, here's how much gold is available. So nobody really knows the true amount of physical gold that is above ground. But I do think one day we will. And how many of those bars are fake, are tungsten filled? And I think, I talked about this a long time ago, that when the truth finally comes out, we're going to have a global remelt of all metal just because nobody knows what anybody has anymore. Even the central banks, there's word that a lot of the gold bars that China was getting are tungsten filled. And so they're basically remelting all their bars into different sizes that fit their needs. So yeah, it's a big mystery as far as the quantity of gold available. But I can tell you this: there's a whole lot less silver, and the 73-to-1 silver to gold ratio right now is just screaming for you to throw all your money into silver and dump all your gold and buy silver by the boatload.
Well, one caveat to that, guys, dump all your money. We do advise in having an asset allocation to anything that you do, because putting, all of your money on any one item, on any one stock or any one commodity is always a risky thing to do. But
Well, I do. My asset allocation is 50% in silver eagles, 20% in junk silver, 10% in 1 ounce silver.
so you're diversified within silver.
Exactly. That's my asset allocation. Then I put 10% in Bitcoin, and I'm happy.
Yeah, Bitcoin. All right. Well, I know you're a Bitcoin guy, and maybe there's reason to be. I think even isn't the Federal Reserve even looking at the Bitcoin?
But yeah. I mean, it's amazing what Larry Summers has joined the board of a Bitcoin company, and that's a real interesting company because they're going to put a Bitcoin mining chip on every mobile phone in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is get everybody who owns a mobile phone, gives them the ability to buy things with Bitcoin. That's the big problem with Bitcoin, is it's not widespread enough. Now Apple's going to come out with a phone with a Bitcoin chip in it that is mining Bitcoin while you're talking on the phone and basically making you money or Bitcoin that you can use. And it is a great example of the technology changing in the form of what are we going to use as currency. And if everybody in Greece had these phones right now, they wouldn't be bartering like they have to do right now.
Well, if everybody in Greece had physical silver or physical gold in their possession, they wouldn't have to be starving either. Because I'll tell you what, man, the situation in Greece is a great example for those of us in this country who have been talking about these issues for a very long time, because it always seems like we're talking about other nations, Bix. We're talking about Venezuela, where now we see hyperinflation really kicking into high gear. We see people starving. We see stores empty. It's a very scary situation, but unless you're living it, unless you're there yourself, it feels very abstract. It doesn't feel like it will ever happen to us. But I'll tell you what, they're building FEMA camps in this country, and DHS and FEMA are going to be empowered to round up American dissidents, and they don't want anybody questioning this system. They don't want anybody questioning the police state or the Pentagon. They don't want anybody questioning the monetary system or the Fed. My God, just take a look at what happened to Fed reporter Pedro da Costa from the Wall Street Journal. He asked Janet Yellen some uncomfortable questions, and now he's been let go from the Wall Street Journal. I mean, the Orwellian fascist police state tyranny that we're seeing cannot be questioned, Bix. It can't be allowed to stand.
Yeah, it's the only difference. Nothing has changed in the last 100 years. It's just that we can see it now.
Yeah.
Now it's visible. Now the people should be getting mad, theoretically, and they're starting in our camp. They are. We've been mad for a long time, but people won't get mad until they lose something personal to them. And with the crash of the banking system because of derivatives, they will lose their checking and savings account, and that will make it personal. Then they'll stand up and say, okay, let's end this crap.
Yeah, I hope you're right. My fear has always been that then people will be too hungry, too scared, and too helpless to be able to stand up, which I've always thought, Bix, is part of the plan by these New World Order powers. I mean, cripple these nations like they've done to the people of Greece. When you cripple them, they can't fight back.
I agree, but remember, the power lies in the money. If our money goes away, their money goes away. They won't have the money to pay their henchmen. They won't have the money to buy off their congressmen. It's one of those things. Like, if you remove the power of the money, and it does come down to the power to print money, like Rothschild said many years ago, you remove that from them, and they are powerless. I mean, completely powerless. If Hillary Clinton isn't getting her UBS millions, then she has no power, and the people who work for her won't work for her unless they get paid off. And it's one of those things. If you remove the money from their control, then and only then do the people get the power.
Okay. Well, the people do still have the pitchforks. They just need to be
We got
reminded.
guns. You kid? We're buying more guns than we ever have before. I love it.
Yeah, that's right. That was a metaphor for guns. But people do still have the power, at least in this country. They want to take that power away, though. The Bix, they don't want people to have guns in this country, as you well know. If they can disarm this nation, if they can take the guns away from the patriots, another American dissident word. I ought not use the word patriotism anymore. If they can take the guns away from the people, that is game over.
But are they? But are they doing that? That's
They're trying.
In my Friday road trip just today, I posed that question: are they really trying, or are they doing something else? Is there something else going on? Because they haven't passed a gun law in who knows how long.
Well, but take a look at New Jersey. Take a look at the East Coast, where they are really starting to criminalize people, lawful gun owners. If you don't turn your gun in, you don't register your gun.
What?
If you don't register your gun or turn some of these illegal guns in,
But what's the flip
you're
side
a
of
criminal.
the flip side of that is that gun sales are going through the roof, ammo sales are going through the roof. The nation is arming itself. Ever
Yeah.
since this started back, what was it, 8 to 10 years ago, when they really started putting the push on with all the false flags and all that, all it's done is increase the amount of guns and amount of ammo in the hands of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there might be something to a few people's theories that they're really not trying to disarm the nation; they're trying to arm the nation and get it ready for this transition.
Well, I love that perspective. It's a contrarian perspective. My perspective is that their efforts to disarm and scare the people and get rid of the guns through false flag shootings and all that kind of stuff has backfired, and people then run to the guns because their plan is backfiring, Bix, because people are waking up. And again, I always try to give praise to Stuart Rhodes from Oath Keepers, because he's one of these men who is not afraid to be labeled an American dissident by this criminal, corrupt system. He's one of the men who's willing to stand up and speak truth and be that last line in the sand, right? I mean, because when they come for the guns, when they want to take Jade Helm live and, disarm or go to war with patriots, those are the men that will be the first responders. And, that'll be the clarion call. That will be the clarion call for a revolution. And in the meantime, what we need to do is be aware that the government loves to use false flag terror and false flag events, some of which are complete and total propaganda, because this government has allowed itself now to use propaganda domestically against the American people. We need to be very, very careful when the next event is blamed on a patriot.
I agree, and it really will come down to, in the end, when it does come, when they do say, okay, we're taking over here now because we've dumbed you down and numbed you so greatly. Will the powers that be able to have the moral position to get the troops to fight for them?
No.
And I don't think so.
No, I don't think
and
so
I think
either.
I think they know that. Look at Jade Helm. Word on the conspiracy side is they were forced to stand down. Yeah, they wanted to do something big, but I heard they were forced to stand down, and it looks like it because it's been going on for over a month now, right? And nothing really big has happened. And I do believe that was part of their plan to get people in position. But yeah, you look at the amount of troops. Good luck. Who was it? I think the Chinese did a study. You need 20% of the people to be armed in order to force things on the rest of a society. Well, Jade Helm was what, 15, 20,000 troops? That's not going to do a thing.
Right. Well, Jade Helm is just one of many military exercises,
Right,
so many of which are done, sort of behind the scenes that nobody ever hears about. That one just happened to be widely publicized because the military labeled, I think, Texas, Utah, and the southern part of California as hostile territory, which
Doesn't that
again,
sound
is
crazy?
it's so blatantly fascist and tyrannical. I mean, these people are
Or
monsters. The people who have hijacked our government, the Zionists, the neocons, the people who report to the bankers, Hillary Clinton, the Bushes, the Clinton family, the Bushes, they are truly demons, Bix. I mean, these are devilish people who have taken over our system, and we just need to take our system, our constitutional system, back from these demonic people.
We've done it before. I mean, look at when we broke away from England. That was really a situation where a small group of people were doing the right thing and got a nation behind them, and we ended up gaining our independence. I think that's kind of where we are now. Our troops, we the people, as in our troops are we the people, won't be mobilized until it hits them personally. And it almost did in 2008. 2008, we were, what, a half an hour away from the destruction of the financial system. What happens if Hank Paulson doesn't stand up in front of Congress at that point in time? Would the people stand up against these tyrants? I believe they will.
I hope you're right, Bix. I hope you're right.
Well, I'll be standing up, and you'll be standing up, and when everybody loses their checking and savings account, they'll be either standing up or crying in their coffee.
That's right. Well, that's why we have these conversations, because maybe there's a new person here or there that joins into these conversations, learns some new information, and decides to protect themselves in the numerous ways that we've outlined here, just one of which would be physical precious metals. Another way of which would be to embrace your Second Amendment rights, go and get your permit to purchase, and learn how to own and use a firearm. Our guest, guys, has been Bix Weir, the one and only Bix Weir from roadtoroota.com. Bix, anything else you want to share with us before we lose you?
No, just hunker down, and hopefully you've got all your affairs in order to withstand a little economic jolt over the next few months.
All right. Bix, thank you so much. And guys, thank you for joining us at sgtreport.com, thelibertymill.com, and thephaser.com. Real news 24/7. Thanks for tuning in. God bless.